Hello, everyone who's joined so far. We're still going to give it another minute to have some attendees because we're having some late joiners. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Joseph Schuster. I'm a head of business development here at Building Radar and for international markets. And joining me today is Simon. Simon, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Simon. Thanks you, Joe. I'm working in the customer success team of Building Radar, and I'm happy to prepare and share these webcast slides for you.
Perfect. So, as the people who have joined us before know, but I'll do the review for everyone who is joining us for the first time. What we like to do in this webcast is take a closer look at the information that we're pulling for new projects, new construction projects in Europe, worldwide, and then also just doing a specification on the USA. Every quarter, we like to take a specific look at one market and really dig deeper into it. This is using the proprietary data that Building Radar pulls, and we can break it down by, even by town specifically. We can go from international to town. Klaus, if you go to the next slide, we can have a look at what that looks like.
Yeah.
So when we look at our indicators, Building Radar, we're a lead generation platform for construction companies and building suppliers in the construction space. Our real strength is helping companies discover, qualify, and win new business earlier than before. So here is a perfect example of our early stage information. This is then a construction project to rebuild an elementary school. We can see then the construction costs are between 50 and 100 million. The categories education and science. We can also give you an address. In many of our leads as well, we can get into deeper information depending on the source of information we pull from to include the companies that are also active in it, architects that are active in it, and any sort of developments there are as well.
Perfect introduction. And as you might know, if you listen to one of our previous webcasts, we started the whole webcast idea back in March 2020, when the outbreak of the Corona crisis was visible, feelable in Europe. Back then, we asked ourselves, okay, what can we learn from our data? Is there any significant break in the data? Is there anything we can draw back to Corona? And it turned out that we found this kind of correlation, and we are happy that we have each month and each quarter attendees who listen to our webcast and who are interested in our data. And this is the international webcast. We also have a monthly German webcast where we present data more focused on the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and of course Europe. In this international webcast, we mainly focus on Europe, worldwide data, and also one focus thema. And maybe to add, before going into detail with this slide, it should be a really interactive webcast. So you can always raise a question, raise your hand. And if you have a question, just write to us, or we can even unmute you so that you can ask your question. But back to our indicators, this is the main idea, right? What we present to you every quarter. Building Radar indicators for the construction activity in Europe, worldwide. And what you see on this slide is the construction activity measured based on early stage information. So what you saw here, this is a typical early stage information a customer of ours would see in Building Radar if he's interested in education and science products, for example, in the United States. And the aggregation of all these kinds of single early stage information, which we collect from e.g. newspapers, etc., is presented here in this graph. Joe, I hope this was not too complicated.
No, it's all good. It's just as a quick recap as well. This is essentially, since Corona, as you can see, the dotted line is when everyone kind of mutually agreed Corona kind of struck true in Europe and the Americas. And we could see, of course, the large dip in projects happening before, and then the slow rebuild. And what we'll be doing today is digging into closer and seeing what industries bounce back the quickest, what industries are still on the rise, and what industries are still suffering.
Exactly. So this is the basis for all of our analysis, to dig deeper into different kind of countries, categories, etc. E.g. for the DACH region, as you see here, we have a more or less similar development in the DACH region for Switzerland and Germany, but in detail a little bit different for Austria. If you constant listener to our webcast, you know this slide, and this is just an update.
Yeah, and just to understand what we're looking at here as well, we're looking at new projects added by week. As you can see on the y-axis, these are net new projects that didn't exist before. And as you can see here, so the spikes, so you could say from this week to the next, in this week they only got there was only 20, 30 net new projects that were discovered. And then here we could see there's about 80 net new projects we discovered, up from that 20. Then of course the counterpoint for negative, how many less were from zero projects that were from the week before. So that's why we had then the drop. So if we say from a positive to a negative, there were then only 30 that were announced.
Yes, and these would be the numbers for DACH region. We also have it specifically for Germany in the midterm or in the long term. And as you see here, this is what we call our V development in our building radar data. Back in February, March, where the index collapsed, but returned without any staying at the bottom to the pre-crisis level. So this is why we call this a V development. And of course, in the second part of this webcast, we're curious how this or how our data looks like in other countries.
Perfect. Let's jump into the
Joe,
worldwide then.
Questions? Let me have a look. No, there are no questions, right?
Yep.
This is something we were asked, or I was asked pretty often, not from our German customers or from our German listeners, but from listeners worldwide who might be not that into what's Building Radar offering, what our data is. And this is why we would like to share some information about our English-speaking leads worldwide. And Joe, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Most
I can jump in here at this point.
Yeah.
So this kind of pulls to how Building Radar discovers its leads, whereas leads in the past have been very much determined by a geography, because of their ability to cover that geography and cover a certain specific market. Since we're using a technology first approach, and more specifically crawlers online, we're only limited by the language they speak. So by utilizing English and German, any project that is in English language we can discover. So as you can see here, is most of the world is already accustomed to, the US dominates a very large part of this market. This is by individual number of leads, not by volume size of construction. But as you can see here, the United States dominates with 62.5%, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and then other new English-speaking countries, think of New Zealand and etc. Now, this does not mean that countries that do not speak English don't get covered. Very often, the companies that we work with who then look at, non-priority markets, let's just say outside of Europe, Asia's, Middle East, where there are other languages that are used, any big project is still very discoverable because they'll be written about in trade papers and presented in that way. So it's still discoverable for us as well. But of course, we'll be finding more projects where those languages are predominantly spoken.
Exactly. And if you might wonder why except of United Kingdom, there is no European country mentioned here. It's just how, like Joe explained, this is just for English-speaking leads. In the next slide, we will see how these English-speaking leads are distributed over cities worldwide. London, New York City, Washington, Los Angeles. It's not much of a surprise, I guess.
No, this is actually a pretty interesting slide because for us, this was a pretty interesting word cloud to look at to see where these things are happening. And then very quickly it turned into an intelligence tool used by our customers to understand where they should be focusing on, what are the cities that are A, still working, and B, bouncing back. So where is there more work to be won? And as you can see here, of course, New York City, very big in the middle there, Washington, London, Los Angeles, all the big cities in the world. But then you're also going to start seeing cities that weren't normally focused on. So Tampa, I'm actually currently right now in Tampa, Sarasota area. And if you live there, you'd see a huge, you wouldn't know it if you didn't live there, but if you do live there, you see there's a huge change going on. There's tons of development. The sky is absolutely dotted with cranes.
I would love
So
to live there, by the way.
it's a lot warmer than Germany is right now. But then you're also seeing
I guess
other,
so.
yeah, other towns which you wouldn't normally maybe focus on or wouldn't think of straight away. So Rochester, New York, Aurora, Nashville, Chennai, if we're in the US still, Columbus, those sort of places. So it's pretty
Exactly.
interesting to see where the development's going.
And also from the same slide, I guess pretty interesting. This is again only English-speaking leads. And English-speaking leads, you might think they do not draw back to non-English-speaking countries like Germany, France, etc. But they do, just due to the fact that also English-speaking sources report about projects in another country. And this is why we, as you prominently see here, Abu Dhabi, Berlin, Paris, Moscow, Bangkok, that these non-English speaking countries or cities are also covered by English speaking leads. So I think we have a question here. Do the towns listed show the construction site or where the specification architect is written based? Yeah, this is a pretty good question. And I also know the person, the question coming from. So it's about the construction site, where the construction site is located. And so I think we should explain it a little bit more detail.
Sure. So the way we're looking at these leads today, or right now, is really by location that it is happening. I see you specifically ask about, the architect or the specification is written. If you're looking for more specific, we call that key account tracking. If you're saying I am looking for that individual company, maybe because we've worked them in the past and we want to know about all their projects, what we do there is we create a key tracking account where you then can give us the names of those companies. So wherever their projects might show up, we can then present them to you. So it's not location based, but rather company based. What we are seeing here in this word jumble or word cloud, or however we call it, this is then just purely based on the amount of leads of construction. So these are amount of construction projects that are located in these towns. So the location of the construction projects. But
and only
to your
early
point,
stage,
yeah, sorry.
No tenders.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. And yeah, let's have a look on the UK and the US. How and this is something we also present in the other webcast, but for those who do not listen to the German webcast, I think it's pretty interesting to show. What we see here is the development of construction activity in the United States and Europe compared as indexed to calendar week 7, so of February 2020. and we see a more or less equal development, but with major differences or slight differences. As for example, you can see here in the beginning that the data for US dropped 2 weeks later than in Europe, and Europe, for example, recovers later than the data for US. And I can pretty well remember April 2020 when we looked at the data and we were at this low, where we talked about how it will develop over time, and now over 1 year later, I think this is pretty interesting. So again, this is the percentage change compared to calendar week 7 of the year 2020. And as you can see, from July on, at least for Europe, we were more or less back to normal. We also have it as comparison for United Kingdom. And as you also can see here, I think it's about the small differences, and of course this overall trend line, which is definitely positive for United Kingdom.
Yeah, and it's funny that we see this as when we're talking to our UK clients. As I said before, I work a lot with our international clients as well. We get the impression that there are more construction projects, but the competition around those construction projects are getting a lot fiercer as the predicted pipeline. So companies or projects they had already in their pipeline were falling out, and so now it's about winning those projects shorter term, I guess you could call it. This is where we're actually coming in to help them quite a bit, so they can discover those projects earlier, so they can have those conversations earlier as well.
Exactly. And maybe it would be a good point to explain again what we show here. What is this? This is aggregation of all single leads a customer of ours could theoretically see on our platform. There are no tenders, it's just the early stage information. So what comes from our German and English speaking classifier, which detects text or which detects construction sites in newspapers, etc.
Yeah, and just to go a bit deeper into that, because maybe not everyone here knows the newspaper classifier. So there are 3 main sources that we pull our leads from. The one are, of course, tenders. The next are projects, which are projects pulled directly from architects' websites. And then the third are what we're looking at here today, are these news classifiers, where we are finding articles, announcements, council minutes of anything published, and we then can understand, the AI will understand if this is related to construction, and then goes deeper into detail of who is mentioned in that article, data. So any companies, any architects, and then of course where it is, when it's happening, and volume and size.
Exactly. And the same we have here in a slightly different view. And I apologize for the small font, but
yeah, that's no problem. So that's why we put it on the side here as well. So if you look from left to right, it'll be California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania. We're seeing more development. And then in categories, so infrastructure, residential, industry, hospitality, education, sports. So this is, of course, pre-pandemic. Infrastructure always comes in very high in every graph we look at, just because it's a large, source of spending, and followed very much by residential and industrial. What's very interesting is how that now changes to the 2020 graph.
Yeah, give me a second.
Where we see Yeah,
Is
so
Wintter.
oh, I think the slide skipped.
Are we back?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Where you can see not too much has changed, I guess you
Yeah,
could say, um, but there are less projects in total.
yeah, exactly. So this is the main outcome also for, if again, I always compare to the German-speaking monthly webcast, but as we surely understood from our data is that we do not see a significant decrease in our activity overall, but it depends on the details. So, for example, office category is something we see in DACH region pretty much decreased, but the overall picture that including infrastructure, including residential units, etc., did not change so much. So for the US, for example, the outcome would be that California, Texas, New York State, these states are still the top states in terms of amount of activity. We also see this for Great Britain. Here we ordered it by cities. So no surprise that London would be number one city, Manchester, Glasgow. And again, this is just about the amount of construction projects listed by these categories. I guess, and this is coming to the end of our presentation. The last slide, I guess, is most interesting.
Yeah, thank you. So here we're looking at then a map of the US with the amount of construction, the change of construction projects from 2019 to 2020. Now, Pennsylvania, Idaho, and California are white. I'm not too sure why that is. Klausi, do you know what that is, or is there no data there?
We have less data there. So
Okay,
there is
gotcha.
still data, but these are the 3 countries, and I will open. Can you see this?
Yes.
So perfect. So I can hope. So you see my
Yes.
yeah. Actually, we don't know why there is less activity, but we know that there is less activity according to our data. For example, for Washington State, Oregon, Nevada. So for Nevada and Arizona, you see slight increases. South Dakota, but I guess from a starting point, if you ask us, was there any change due to Corona? Can you say anything about Corona impact on the construction market? I would say a first indicator would be that these 3 states suffered due to any reason. I know we cannot give a reason why, but we can just calculate these numbers and present it to you. And again, these are no tender information. In the tender information, it's just the early stage information our classifier finds. This is also overall categories. So it includes all kind of structural work, civil engineering work. Category infrastructure is present, residential office. It could be that in these 3 countries, these 3 states where we see the significant decrease, for example, the hospitality or the office sector significantly decreased. And if you are interested in this kind of analysis, please write to us. So this is exactly what we can find out for you. From our side, from this webcast, it's just to give you an idea about what we can do. So, for example, Joe, if you have any clients, prospects in the United States who are interested in this. I could imagine that they are interested in how this developed or looks like specifically for the office market, for example.
I think we actually just got that as a question here as well. How is it possible to get an appointment to see the lead specific to my market? Yes, that is possible. You'll receive an email after this with a recording of the demo and also an ability to talk time with us. So reply to that email or go through our website as well to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to sit down, understand your target market more, understand the geography, or maybe a different way that you search after your clients. We are able to customize it more, and then we can create a demo instance to see these recent projects that are showing up in your markets. So yeah, as again, you'll receive an email after this with the recording, and feel free to respond to that. Thank you for that question. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. I hope this helped. Always happy when people join us. We have a slowly growing audience that joins us for our international webcast. So thank you for all our loyal fans, and thank you for the new ones that have discovered us as well.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you also from my side, and hope to see you next quarter. And please feel free to write to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.